given the backdrop of you have mentioned that we need to make probably more capital investments in the hospital or healthcare setting. Like, how do we even go about doing that? What are some prescriptions that you may have, especially now given the backdrop of the so many things like everyone talks about AI, right? That you have AI doctors. I don't know. Maybe it's not going to happen this year, maybe not next year, but it's going to happen at some point where there's an AI assistant or something along those
Yes.
lines. So how do we in Canada get like almost ahead of that? Given that we have a labor shortage, these labor dynamics that are quite unique, how do we drive that efficiency by investing more capital into
Yeah.
the system? Go
Well,
ahead.
I mean, what we really need is a pretty major transformation. Now, I'm hopeful because of, some of the policy directions that I see coming out from the federal government, which is, I think, a recognition that, I mean, my zone is healthcare, but I think this is a problem across Canada, and it's one of the reasons why we have not, we have not been as efficient as a nation as we could be, because we have, during a time where labor was everywhere, we relied on labor, and, it was reasonably cheap. And now labor is really expensive. And so it's not smart to rely on labor anymore. Yes, we'll always need labor, but we need technology that makes that labor the most efficient, use of it as possible. And so we've got a ways to catch up. Information systems are still not where they need to be in hospital. There's still no communication between hospitals and home care in terms of flow of information in most places. That's different in some of the regionalized provinces. You talk about AI assistance. It's very much in its infancy in terms of actual use case in healthcare right now, but we should be using AI for assisting, for example, with triage. In EDs, we have a triage nurse and or two, depending on your volumes. There's no reason why we shouldn't have AI programs to be able. You're still going to need the nurse, but she could probably triage a whole lot faster if we had some of those systems, right? Same with radiology, same with, a number of different, diagnostic tools, for example. In terms of capital, we have old hospitals, some that are like 100 years old, and they've all been like retrofitted and everything. And so what's happened is that, the labor that we have are used to working in really inefficient ways because they've had to do workarounds to compensate for what they don't have in technology. And so if you had like skookum hospitals that were really efficient, step efficient, for example, that didn't require you to walk a lot further to be able to get what you need, that where you didn't have to search for supplies and equipment, where you had enough operating rooms, for example, that surgeons could flip from room to room, instead of having to wait for the turnover between a room in terms of sterilization and cleaning. You could save a lot, and you would need less. We wouldn't have to, we've got labor shortages, so this wouldn't be about. I'm not a fan of getting rid of labor, but what it would help us do is mitigate some of those shortages, by using the people we do have in a much more effective way. And I think industry across Canada needs to do this. And so if the feds have a way maybe of doing some of this investment, that would be amazing.